So we have defined in our .NET Standard project this interface that is so far only going to have one member, that is a method that is going to be receiving 3 strings. And we actually already went ahead and implemented this over on Android and on iOS, which means that we created a class that is implemented this interface, which of course means that we have that corresponding method. So far, no functionality inside of them, but they are here. And also we have went ahead and registered these as dependencies. Now, what we have to do is actually go ahead and use these dependencies. Now, I already have this expenses VM class where I am going to be eventually calling somehow the share report method, most likely from a command. And I was already actually showing you how you can call these methods from an interface, but because these are dependencies, we're going to be working slightly different in here. We actually need to use from the dependency service the interface itself, which is going to result in something very similar, but take a look at how we're going to be able to do that. What I'm going to do is create a new variable that is going to be the share dependency. And the share dependency is going to be equal to what the dependency service is going to get as an iShare instance. Let's call it that. So what I will do is call from dependency service the get method. And notice that it's going to request what type this is going to be. And I can just tell it that it's going to be an iShare type. Just like this. And now my share dependency is of type iShare. But because I am going to be calling it like this, the dependency service is already going to know if this is going to be created from a share class from Android or a share class from iOS, of course, depending on what project is running. So this is already going to be an object that is coming from a specific class, but of course still as an interface. By the way, it doesn't matter if these two classes are called the same way, as long as they are registered and implement this interface. This is what matters. And then the dependency service is going to get an instance of those specific classes as the interface itself. And everything that we have talked about interfaces and that we know about interfaces applies here. We know that because this is of an interface, there is a show method. I don't care how Android implements it. I don't care how iOS implements it. Or well, I do care, but the shared code and the dependency services don't care so long as it's there, which it absolutely has to because these classes are implementing the interface. Which means that this shared dependency has that show method. Again, it doesn't matter, at least at this point, how this is being implemented. I, of course, need to pass those 3 strings. Let me just pass this empty string so far. The important thing here is that it absolutely exists for both Android and iOS. So yeah, this is how you're going to be calling a method from the interface, now getting the instance for that interface like this. So the dependency service. By the way, this is exactly what I had before at the beginning when I deleted that code that I showed you a couple of lessons ago. Basically, we are just getting the instance by calling from dependency services and the get method. Now let me go ahead and show you what is actually going to be executing and show you that this actually works. So I'm going to go ahead and test this out first on Android. For that, let me momentarily call this method from the add expense method, which is the plus icon that we have in the expenses page. So of course, this is not where the share report method is going to be executed. We're going to talk about that in the next couple of lectures, but I just want the method to be executed for us to take a look at what breakpoint are we going to hit in the case of Android, of course. Maybe we can assume which one is going to be, but let's go ahead and test that out. So here the application launches, and let's just go over to the other tab, press on add, and we see the breakpoint hit right here on the share class, on the show method from the Android project, which is exactly what we expect, but here it is. It does work and we are going to be executing the correct method. Of course, the iOS method will have nothing to do in here because we're not on iOS, but you see how the dependency service is going to work very easily. Now let's go ahead and test on iOS. We should see the other show method breakpoint being hit. So now we see here the emulator starting. Just give it a few seconds. Here the app launches. Let's go ahead and navigate over to the expenses tab, click on that plus icon, and we see the correct show method being executed. So there you have it. This is how you're going to be using dependency services. You already know how to register them, you already know how to use them. That is pretty much everything that you need to know about dependency services. Now, of course, now that we know this, we're actually going to be adding some platform-specific code. It's not the important part about this section. The important part was about knowing about, creating the interface, registering the dependencies, and using the dependencies. But we do have to implement that functionality, so these methods are not entirely empty, so they actually work. So what we're going to do is in the next few lectures, we're going to be adding some functionality so we can create some reports in here, some file. It can be a TXT file, and actually share it through the native functionality of sharing on iOS and Android as well. So starting in the next lecture, we're actually going to be making a couple of changes because I made some mistakes in here. These should actually go in the categories VM because we need that export button in the categories page. It's of course going to be the exact same thing, but once we have that, we're going to be generating this file and we're going to be adding the functionality starting with iOS of how we share that.